Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. In the meantime, if you want to share where you're calling in from, that's always fun to see. I am now back from New Mexico and in San Francisco. And Claire, where are you calling in from today?
I'm in Tiburon, outside of San Francisco.
Okay. And Melissa, where are you?
I am in Los Angeles.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. Okay, people are going to continue to stream in, but I don't want to take any time away from the conversation that you're all about to hear today. So welcome to Holding Space with Claire Bidwell Smith and Melissa Gould. My name is Dara Cosberg, and I am the program director at Reimagine. And just for those who don't know what Reimagine is, we are a nonprofit organization that sparks community experiences like this one that empower individuals, families, and communities to face some of the hardest parts of our existence, including serious illness and death, while celebrating life and one another. And I just have a few things to run through. So first, I just wanted to express my profound gratitude to our 2020 sponsors, or sorry, 2021 sponsors who are shown here, who support Reimagine and help make this work possible. I also just want to thank all of you who've donated to Reimagine, as that really is what lets us to continue having free events and continuing our programming. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to introduce Claire, who is a wonderful grief therapist and author, and has been holding space with us now for probably over a year. And I'm just delighted to hear this conversation between her and Melissa. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you, Dara. Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be here today with Melissa Gould, author of Widowish. We are going to be talking today about grief and what it means to lose a partner. And I've just got lots of questions for you, Melissa. I would love for you to start by telling us a little bit about your story, and in terms of like also why the title Widowish. It's like, I think you can dovetail both of those together.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, it's so nice to be here, and I appreciate everybody who's showing up. And of course, Claire, it's so great to see you. And thank you, Dara, also. So basically, Widowish is my story of unexpectedly becoming a widow, young in life, and having really the expectations of mourning put upon me, meaning I couldn't understand that I was a widow because I was happily married. My husband and I were great friends. We liked each other. We loved each other. And he died unexpectedly of West Nile virus and complications of multiple sclerosis. So,
And how old were you both?
I was in my 40s, and we had, our daughter was 13 at the time. And I feel like, my world became turned upside down. And thankfully I did have my daughter to focus on, whether she liked that kind of attention or not, but like she really gave me a reason to get up every day. But I came up with the title Widowish because I felt like I didn't look like a widow because I was younger. I didn't act like a widow, in large part because I had to continue living my life. Again, like my daughter became my primary focus. And getting her to school, getting her to her activities, like keeping her on track is what kept me on track. So I didn't look like a widow. I wasn't necessarily acting like a widow because I wasn't home with the curtains drawn, like crying. I mean, I was, but people didn't see that when they saw me at Trader Joe's or going to yoga. They didn't know my experience, but I felt like a widow. And I still feel like a widow. And that's how I came up with Widowish, because I didn't necessarily meet the expectations of mourning and the societal belief of what grief looks like, what widowhood looks like. And really that's what Widowish is about, is sort of reconciling this world of still feeling married, still feeling like connected to my husband who had died. And then also finding love again, which was also very unexpected and soon after losing my husband. And it's really, and also about being what I call an only parent. I have an only child. I feel like I became an only parent, was responsible for her, as we all are, whether you're married or coupled or not. Our kids are a responsibility 24/7, but there was no one else. It was just me and our daughter, and life just changed.
Yeah, I can imagine. Had you ever been through any big grief before that?
You know what, Claire? It's interesting. I really hadn't. I mean, I feel like my grief experience was very traditional in a way. I lost my grandparents. I lost beloved pets and things in the home, but I didn't ever think I would lose my husband. And I mentioned that even though he had multiple sclerosis, that is not a death sentence. That's a quality of life kind of disease, and we were managing. So losing him was so surreal. I mean, when he went into the hospital, I kept thinking, okay, they'll make him better, and then he'll come home and we'll resume. But I didn't know that when we walked into the hospital, that would be the last conversation I had with him.
Yeah. So when you found yourself as a widow grieving, what were your expectations of grief, and what were the cultural messages you received about what it should be like, as opposed to maybe what it was?
It's almost like hard to say what it was, because it was so enormous. And my husband, Joel, was in the hospital for 3 weeks in a coma before the doctors were able to figure out that he had West Nile virus. So it's almost like I was experiencing grief before he actually died. And even backing up from that, again, with the multiple sclerosis, we always are, I think we're always grieving in different kinds of ways that aren't necessarily pertaining to a death. But people go through divorce, they go through life changes, they have friendships that, after 20 years, you end up not being friends with the person for whatever reason. So I think we have like these micro grief experiences. I certainly did in life, but I feel like when Joel was dying, it was enormous. And I somehow was able to focus. I was able to have these conversations with the doctor. But it was such a sad and surreal time that I think it took me it's been years since I was able to look back and reflect on that time and think, okay, that really was me actively grieving, actively in grief.
You must have been in survival mode in that first year or 2 years or 3 years,
Yeah, I think I was. And I think, and I write about a lot of that in Widowish, just how surreal my life had become.
Yeah.
I really felt for my daughter. What's interesting about Sophie is that she has 4 sets of grandparents. They're all still alive, which is a gift. That is a tremendous gift, that she has these connections with her grandparents, but it's out of order. Like I said, my experience with grief is more traditional. Our daughter lost her dad, but her grandparents are all still here. It's just very different for her. Her experience is different than mine. And
right, her experience is more like my experience. I lost my parents young, and my mom's mom, my grandmother, died 10 years after my mom. So I had my grandmother.
right.
She died when I was in my late 20s, which to me felt so strange. I was like, I can't believe she's here and my mom isn't here. So I get that. How old is Sophie now?
She's 20.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about teenage grief. I feel like this is something that people really get confused around, because adolescent child grief does not display in the way that we expect it to, or we think about grief. And so people often, I think, get very preoccupied and worried about how their child or teen is doing, because they're not seeing grief in the way that they think that it should look. So tell us a little bit about your experience with that and what you learned.
That's so accurate, Claire, because, I was a hot mess. I was crying all the time. I mean, I really was like, my experience was like, I was just very apparent that I was grieving. Sophie hardly cried, really kind of shut down, kept things very close to the vest, felt very alienated and isolated. None of her friends had experienced anything similar. And it was very different, like I said, from how I was grieving. And that was a concern. And I was thinking, like, what, like, why isn't she crying? And then I would say, like, now's a good time to cry if you feel like, and she would get mad at me. Don't tell me how and when I should cry. And, 13 is a very tender age to begin with. And I think, she was in 8th grade. And I think when you're in 8th grade or you're in middle school, you just want to be like everybody else. And this immediately differentiated her from everybody else. And she was like the girl whose dad died.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, I was maybe more aware of it in some ways than she was, just having my adult perspective, but we did grieve very differently. And, I have to say, I think she's amazing and she's turned out, I mean, she's just an amazing young woman. And she certainly had her struggles, but I think she's done okay. I really tried to model for her that whatever she was feeling was fine. Once I wrapped my head around the fact that we were grieving so differently, I didn't want to make her feel bad. I think so many people feel like they're doing grief wrong, or they're doing it in some way that's like incorrect. There's no such thing. And so I really tried to normalize for my daughter that what she was experiencing was okay, even though it looked so different. And honestly, it was like I was doing that for her and myself as well. It was like a learning curve.
I think so much of that is that when you're a child or an adolescent, they don't see the loss the same way we do. As an adult, we see all that they've lost, right? We see what a 13-year-old has lost. We know that her dad won't be there when she graduates high school and college, and all these milestones, and when she perhaps becomes a mother herself, all these things. She's 13. She's thinking about, dad not being there next week for a basketball game or something, but not thinking about it in this really huge, tragic way that we see. And so, in my work as a grief therapist, I have many, many clients that will come to me in their early 30s, having gone through a loss in childhood or adolescence, a loss of a parent. And it's around their early 30s when it suddenly kind of swings into full bloom, where they really understand it for the first time, in like the absolute fullness of it. And I think it's something about developmentally our brain and emotions at that age of our early 30s, but also that point in life, where they really are an adult now and they know what it means to be an adult, and they can think about their parent in a new way. Like, wow, so my dad was only 10 years older than me right now when he died, or whatever it is. So I work with a lot of people who come in at that time. And it's not that they're still like deep in the throes of grief, but they're really looking at, how has this loss shifted who I am in the world? How has it impacted all these areas in my life? And it's fascinating work. And I think it's really great work that people do at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because in some ways I'm still waiting for that moment, like I really was desperate to get Sophie in a grief group. She resisted. She didn't want to participate. So I just got her into therapy one-on-one, and been in therapy for most of the time since her dad has died. But even then I can't help but think, well, why isn't she, or, she hasn't dealt with this, but again, it's like, it's her journey. I can only do so much. Again, it was a very different experience for her at 13 than it was for me. But there are things, I mean, you just mentioned something about like what she knows or what she's aware of, and what at 13 she was considering her dad might miss. But I have to tell you, every birthday, and she's a big one coming up, 21, it's hitting me hard. It's hitting me in ways I wasn't expecting. And it's been 7 years since my husband died. But this particular birthday of our daughter, I know what she doesn't, which is like how proud of her Joel would have been, how much he would have felt like celebrating this big milestone. I mean, listen, he missed everything from middle school graduation to learning how to drive, high school graduation, picking out colleges, college tours. She'll be a college senior next year. Like, he's missed the entirety of her, young adult into adult life. And that stuff is heartbreaking to me. but again, I don't know that Sophie is as aware of what she is missing out on as I am.
Right, because you are experiencing all the things he's missing. So
Right.
it's a little different for her. What are some of the ways that you have found to kind of keep him alive, bring him into these moments, these milestones, keep his memory part of your family?
It's so funny. I feel like I talk about Joel all the time. Um, I still have tons of photos of him throughout our house. Sometimes his photos will pop up on like my social media, like memories of, I always send them to Sophie. We talk about him, we laugh at, I mean, I feel like it's something that I wasn't even aware I was doing, but I have just kept him present and alive. And also that is such a gift of having my book out in the world, as I feel like now more people know about Joel. They know about our life and our love and our just the world that we had together. And that is such a gift because I'm hearing from people all the time commenting about him, and I just feel like I've shared him with the world, and
Yeah.
it keeps coming back to me in ways that I didn't see coming. And that is just, that's incredible.
I've had a similar experience with my parents. I remember the first time I held the paperback of my memoir, and I thought, oh my God, they're like in the world now forever, and people will know
Right.
them, and they're here, and I still talk about them all the time now, and so many people will talk about them too. It's pretty amazing.
Well, that's something else about grief, Claire, that I feel like people are, people ask me all the time, like, what do you say? You probably get this like 1,000 times more than I do, but people don't know what to say to somebody who's grieving. They're afraid to say the person's name. Like, I love it when people
Mhm.
say Joel, when they want to ask me a question about Joel, or they just want to bring him up. Or they remember something they want to share with me, or they've read the book, they've never met him or me for that matter, and they talk about him. That is so, I just love that. Like, that's everything.
Yeah. Well, I love that you wrote this book because it's a little bit of a different take on widowhood. You're looking at it through a different lens than I think has been out there a lot. But there's, like you said, there's no right way to grieve. There's no wrong way to grieve. Everyone is so individual. And I think it's really important to have as many versions of grief out there so that people feel permission to be going through it as only they do. And I
Right.
think when we have narrow versions of grief or narrow stories, it makes people feel like that's how they're supposed to do it, even if it's incongruent with what is going on for them. Um, and loss of a partner, I think, is a really interesting one because I think our culture has a lot of ideas about how you should go through the loss of a partner. And
Yeah.
they give you those ideas for different ages as well, or for different kinds of partners. And I think that the more different ways we can have out there about going through that loss, the better, because it puts a lot of pressure and weird messages on people who are going through that. How has that been in your experience?
That's again like how I kind of came up with widow-ish. It was really more about how I felt I was being perceived in the world, as opposed to like me feeling like, oh, I'm only kind of a widow. Like, I am a widow, like full-bodied widow, with all the pain and sadness and devastation that comes along with that. But I think because I was younger when my husband died, people didn't know what to do with me. I mean, I felt like the town widow. I write about this in Widowish in a few different places, but people would come up to me crying, and I realized that what I was really just a projection, a screen really for everybody else to put their projections of what widowhood meant, or grief or loss, onto me. And it was this weird, like, I didn't want to comfort anybody else. I know that's a common thing with people who are grieving. They feel like they need to comfort the people around them. I didn't want that. And so when people would come up to me, they'd see me in Trader Joe's and they'd be crying and they'd be saying, I don't know what I would do if it were me. And it's like, I just would kind of roll my eye. Like, I didn't have the patience that I just felt like I kind of owned, like, this is me, this is my experience. I am in shock and I'm just devastated by this. And I just didn't want to have to deal with this burden of, again, it's almost like a stereotype, but we think of like a widow as like an older woman dressed in black with a veil, handkerchief all day long, sitting in a dark house. Like, I had to be out in the world. I had, responsibilities in addition to my daughter, just living my, like, having to get groceries, going to work, being, I just felt very self-conscious and very much like the town widow. And I couldn't stand this idea. I knew that the first thing people thought when they saw me or when they saw Sophie was like, oh, that's it was like this.
That pity. Yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't take it. I understood it, but it was a lot. It was a lot to hold on to.
Yeah. I think that loss of a partner, with it comes a lot of life change, because again, the word partner, this is your partner. This is the person you are going through life with. You have a home together, you have kids possibly together, you share bills and responsibilities and taking out the trash and all these things. So when someone loses a partner, their whole life kind of gets pulled out from underneath them, and they have to rearrange a lot of things. And I've read that for women, typically financially, it's very difficult for women who lose a spouse.
Yeah.
There are just so many factors about this that are a little different from other losses. Loss of a parent, loss of a child, loss of a different family member don't always have as huge ripple effect of, kind of logistical ramifications that happen with widowhood.
Oh yeah. That's the thing. Joel was my partner in every way. He was an active and devoted father. He wasn't like a weekend dad kind of person.
Yeah.
So, and even though we only had one child, it's the same amount of responsibility and work. And his absence became a huge presence, and there were so many things that I just, even to this day, I think, oh God, I wish Joel could just do that, but I'm the one who's doing it. There's a tremendous amount of worry. Just like you said, the logistics of losing your partner and the different responsibilities we had, just managing our life was huge. And so it's like, and you're dealing with all of that stuff, the financial worry, the worries just about your day-to-day stuff that, you would talk about going to sleep at night, like, oh, tomorrow I have to do this. And remember you're doing that. And like, it was just me. So that weight of responsibility, I still feel that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a lot. And I think it's often overlooked that is happening for someone. And so you're in the throes of the emotional realm of it and just coping with all of that, and then all of the other practical stuff that you have.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to open it up to questions in a little bit. If you guys want to put anything in the chat as we keep talking, thinking about anything you want to ask Melissa or myself. Now you repartnered. Tell us a little bit about that. I don't know what the right phrase is. Repartner sounds weird. I don't know. What do you have?
I've never heard that before. That's great. Yeah. So, it's such a crazy, when I think about it or when I talk about it, I was like, God, this really is nuts that this happened. But so I have a boyfriend, and the way we repartnered is that we ran into each other several months after Joel had died. It was maybe like 7 or 8 months. And at that time I was cleaning out the house. I was kind of getting rid of Joel's things. Slowly, I just kind of it hit me like it's time. And I started getting rid of Joel's things, and Joel was in the music industry. And I found a bunch of stuff of his in the garage that I completely forgot we even had, like his guitars and amplifiers and, just all kinds of stuff. And I didn't know what to do with it. And I ran into, he's now my boyfriend, Marcos. One night, he was our daughter's guitar teacher. And I didn't really know him. That guitar fell under Joel's jurisdiction. So of course I had met him a few times, but I didn't really know him. And like everyone at the time, he offered his help. He's like, if you ever need, I heard about Joel, if there's anything you guys need, just let me know. And like I had, we've been discussing, like the fact that he even said Joel's name to me at a time when people were still nervous to say anything Joel related around me. And he was just very confident in talking about Joel, bringing up Joel's name, how he interacted with Sophie when he would bring her to her lessons. It was such a comfort to me and such a relief. And so I thought, oh yeah, he can help me with all the music stuff. And he did. And so over a period of time, he kind of helped me get rid of all of these things. And it was very cathartic. Some people really struggle with when to get rid of their loved ones' things, if they even do. Some people get rid of it. I have a friend who's a widow. I mean, literally like the next day, she cleaned out her whole house of everything. Like, I don't know, that was not my experience, but so in this process of getting rid of some of Joel's things, I kind of thought, I like this guy. And I was getting the same vibe from him. And that was, several years ago. And it was, we fell in love very unexpectedly. We are not a traditional couple. We don't make a lot of sense to people. But there was something about him that I just thought was comforting. And again, I think it was because he was so comfortable in his own skin. He has never overstepped. Like, he is so respectful of my love for Joel that I still feel married to Joel. Like I said, Joel and I were a very happily married couple. We had a good thing. And so becoming a widow because my husband died, also, I couldn't wrap my head around. Like, I felt like, well, I'm still married. I don't understand. Like, why do I have to declare myself anything other than married? I'm married. My husband died. Like, that's a whole other thing.
So this wasn't Sophie's experience though, right?
No, I mean, as with everything, it was so not her experience. She was very understandably scared. I mean, when I told her about Marcos, which I wasn't even sure I should tell her, because I wasn't sure where we were going, but we had been together long enough that I felt like I was sneaking around behind her back. Some of my friends knew, and I didn't want Sophie to hear it from somebody else. And so I told her, and she completely freaked out and was very upset, very angry, and rightfully had feelings like, you can always have another husband, but I will never have another dad.
Right.
And I said to her, Daddy is always going to be my husband. Always. Like, he is my forever husband. That hasn't changed, but this is what's going on. And she has slowly come to an acceptance around it. It hasn't always been easy. But again, I give her the room to have her experience of what this is. It's different from mine. And she also knows she's my priority no matter what. She's always has been, always will be. And nobody else in my life is ever going to take away from my relationship with her, ever.
How does she feel about the book being out in the world?
She loves it. I think she's, I've always made my living as a writer. And so she was very familiar with, like, oh, mommy's TV show is on now, or, I never wrote anything so personal. We both kind of got used to it because I had so many essays published leading up to writing this memoir. I didn't know, like Claire, when I met you so many years ago, I didn't even know I was necessarily going to be writing a memoir. At that time, I had just been writing about my grief and writing about this experience I was having in the world as a younger widow and as an only parent. And I was publishing all of these essays, and I was thinking, maybe I should write a memoir. Maybe I do have more to say on the subject. So Sophie kind of had time to get used to the idea, because I had, essays in the LA Times and the New York Times and on BuzzFeed and some places on the internet. Like, she was aware that I was writing about this. So it wasn't like a shock. Like, what do you mean you wrote a book? It's like, it's how I've always made a living. And so I think it was just kind of, okay, now she has a book out, but she's happy about it. I will say, and this comes up a lot, writing the scenes with Sophie in the book were really the most challenging for me, because I didn't want her to feel like I was telling her story. Like, it's very clear, Widowish is my memoir. It's my experience. My daughter is obviously a huge part of that. But I was very careful in the scenes I shared that Sophie and I, the things that we went through together, it's my perspective. If I didn't want Sophie to feel like I was taking away from her experience or changing her experience or embellishing her experience in any way. I kind of just kept it very factual, and she is so appreciative that I did it in that way.
I love that. It's hard to do. You know, that's a question I get asked a lot when I teach memoir is how do you write about other people in your life? And
Yeah,
it really is always going back to writing your experience, not theirs. You know, they're in there, but being clear as you go, you know, this is how it felt for me. This is what it
right.
was
That's
like to
exactly
me.
right.
This is
Yeah.
what I remember. It's tricky. So I often say about my memoir, maybe all of my books, that these are the ones I wanted and needed when I was grieving. And I
Right.
imagine that your story is a version of what you needed when you were grieving or when you were going through this. But Kay asks, what were some helpful resources for you as a widow, books, groups? Were there things that really resonated with you? Was there something missing that you really felt like you needed in your experience?
Um, it's so funny. I need to like rephrase this, but I feel like I was very selfish in my grief. And I felt like I was very territorial. Like nobody was married to Joel, so nobody knows what I am going through. Nobody knows what it's like to lose your person. Nobody, even though of course that's a ridiculous thought. There's tons
No,
of
I think that's one of the beautiful things about grief. I think those of us who go through a really big grief feel like no one else has ever experienced it like this. But
right.
I think the same can be true about falling in love, you know, like
Oh,
when
that's
we
so
really fall in love,
funny.
it's like no one has ever fallen in love like this, you know? But I think the same happens with grief. Like no one has ever grieved this hard for this kind of person and this kind of loss. And there's something kind of beautiful about that. I don't think
I
it's
love it. I love that perspective, Claire. I think that's great. I mean, the things that really helped me are very unorthodox because, and there, it's in my book, but, and actually your book after this was, I loved that. I think I already, when did that come out, that book?
oh gosh, 2015.
I was just going to say 20. Okay. So that book really helped me because I believe that there are people who can tune into this frequency where they can connect with those of us who have lost people we love. So that book was helpful, but really, like I write about in the book, I found tremendous comfort in books written by Ian Van Zant, who is a spiritualist, I would say, who speaks universe. And there was something about her writing that I found very comforting. There are a lot of books out there that are specific to widows. And I had friends sending them to me and giving them to me. I couldn't connect with them again, because I think I felt too territorial over my grief being so unique, and then also, and this is so crazy, but I loved, I'm a nice Jewish girl who lives in Los Angeles. I love listening to Joel Osteen sermons.
Mm-hmm.
That was crucial to my healing. I couldn't tell you why. I am not an evangelist. Evangelist. I didn't convert to anything, but hearing his message of higher power, belief, this and that really resonated for me. So I found healing in some very, like I said, unorthodox ways. And I think I think that again speaks to grief. Everybody, we all kind of have our own journey with it.
I agree. I think it's important to like kind of look through all of those books and take bits and pieces that make sense to you. There's not going to be one book that fits your experience, that's going to have all the answers for you. There are so many books for widows. There's so many books for women or who've lost moms or people who've lost parents or people who've lost children. And not one of them is going to be this perfect fit, yet they all have bits and pieces that I think are really helpful. But I think that this spiritual journey, Melissa's talking about my second book called After This, which is me kind of going on my own spiritual journey to figure out what happens when we die. And I was going on this to figure out this for myself, but also for all my clients, because I think it's kind of impossible to go through a loss as big as a spouse and not wonder, where are they? And are they okay? And can they see me? And can I talk to them? And am I ever going to see them again? No matter what you've been brought up in, no matter what you've not believed or believed, I think it's hard to not start to question these things. And so I see it in so many of my clients, and I wanted to be able to kind of really dive into it and talk about it. And I think that's a helpful part of the grief journey. One that sometimes people are afraid to go on, either it's because they have a set religion or spirituality they've been raised in or have adopted previous to the loss, and it feels like a betrayal to kind of tread outside of that territory, or it feels just murky and scary. But I think it's an important part of it. Do you feel connected to Joel?
Oh, I absolutely do. And by the way, like, I was always open to that kind of spirituality, psychics, tarot. I know it sounds like a little woo-woo to a lot of people, but for me, I've always just kind of had that in my life. So it wasn't like this big stretch of like, am I going to talk to him again? Or I don't know. I feel that I have definitely kept Joel close and present in my life and in our daughter's life. And I embrace that. And I'm always looking for ways like, where is he? Like you just said, like, where are you? In the very early days of losing him, I was constantly like, where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And I was constantly looking for signs. I think I have a whole chapter in Widowish about signs and things I was looking for and ways I did feel connected to him after he had died. And I know that some of this sounds crazy to people, and that's okay. But for me, this was all part of my healing on this grief journey that I've been on.
I don't think it sounds crazy at all. I think more people probably get it than you think, particularly those who are grieving. Because again, I think it's really difficult to go through a big loss and not wonder and have questions about that sense of connection. For me, initially, after my mother died, I couldn't think about anything aside from her being here. I just wanted her back here. I didn't want to think about like if she existed somewhere else or if we had this ethereal spiritual connection. I just wanted her back here. So it took me a while to get around to a kind of more spiritual feeling about it all and a sense of connection. That took me some time, like maybe like a decade, but then I really got there, and that is very much a part of how I connect with my parents and feel connected with them today, But for some people, I think it takes a lot of time, and it's usually not something a lot of people want to hear right away, in those
I
first
know.
weeks.
Yeah, I think everybody's different. And I just, listen, I think I'm always unpacking my grief in some ways. Like, so that kind of connection, that ethereal connection that I felt with Joel, that came very easy and comfortable to me. But believe me, I'm still figuring things out. I still feel like, literally every day I say to myself, like, this is so crazy that Joel's not here. Like, and it's been 7 years and I still can't believe it, and I've, like, we're talking about, like, I've written so many essays, I've written this book, I've been in, community around grief and other widows. And I'm very comfortable in this grief space. But it doesn't mean that, like, I have figured it all out and that I'm over it. I'm not over it. I don't think you get over grief or the loss of your person. I think you learn to live with it. I think I've said this a million times, but I think time is a miraculous healer. That's something, if you had told me that in the very beginning, I would have thought, no way, I'm going to be bereft the rest of my life. And I kind of came to like an acceptance around that, actually. Like, I'll just be bereft the rest. I'll make sure Sophie grows up happy the best I can, but I'm just going to be bereft the rest of my life. And I think that's also when Marcos came into my life, it was like a little window of like, oh, and again, I don't want to like misconstrue anything. It's not like he saved me. It's not like he made my grief go away, but he was so comfortable in his own skin and continues to be, that there is space for Joel in my relationship with Marcos. And that
reminded you that you can be happy as well as bereft. I'm
Yes.
always trying to remind people that like two things can be true at once. You can be deeply sad and always missing your person and still have moments of joy and meaning in your life.
Absolutely. These things coexist, and it's a gift, really.
Yeah. So Terry says, what would you rather have others say to you after the fact to help others when relating to you and the loss of Joel?
For me, it was always enough and always the right thing if somebody just said, I'm thinking of you.
Yeah.
Or you're in my thoughts. Or even, I'm so sorry. that was enough for me. And I was so appreciative because I know I have an understanding how difficult it is for people who want to connect. They want to let you know, but I just didn't want to hear like how they don't know how I did it. They don't know what they would do if it was, if they were experiencing what I was experiencing, or trying to connect because they just lost their 85-year-old aunt. Like it's a very different experience. And like poor Sophie, like so many of her friends were like, I know, because when my goldfish died or when my cat died, and it's like, that's a pet. Like, and we are like an animal loving family, but it still doesn't compare to losing one of your parents. So I think just for me, again, that was just like an acknowledgement. I heard about Joel, I'm so sorry. Or you're in my thoughts. That was for me, everything.
I think one of the worst things that someone can do is not acknowledge it, not say anything at all. I think that hurts. I think it also sends a message of silence. Like, I'm not talking about it. I'm not creating space for you to talk about it. Therefore, you shouldn't talk about it. Which
Oh,
can
that's so
create
interesting.
shame,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I did have a few experiences like that too, where people who, again, like I don't think people know what to say. I think the subject of grief and death and loss is so frightening to so many people that they either say the wrong thing or say nothing. And you're right, saying nothing is almost worse.
Yeah. I think unless you've been through it, it is scary. It's scary to think about it happening to you. It's scary to think about someone being in the amount of pain they imagine you're in. And so I think that it brings up a lot of their own stuff and they get really nervous about it. And so I think most people mean well, but they can say some, really ridiculous things. Hope Edelman, who wrote Motherless Daughters, she and I used to lead a series of retreats for women who'd lost their moms. And there was always one morning on the retreat when we would ask the women, like, we were always talking about messages of grief. What messages did you get about how you should grieve, what it should look like? So we would ask them, what are the worst things that people said to you after your mom died? And this was like the most popular moment of the retreat. Every hand went up in the room. Everybody had something that someone said to them that like really hurt or angered them or was ridiculous. It was pretty funny.
I think that would be really funny. And I'm sure everybody does have a story.
Yeah.
I mean, I write about this in the book, but when I first went to a party with Marcos, and it was a little nerve-wracking for me because again, I was the town widow and just showing up somewhere with like on a date. And the minute we walked in, this woman I knew from the neighborhood, kind of pulled me aside and said, "You're here on a date? When did your husband die?" And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I couldn't believe that was, she was clearly like, expressing how she was feeling about the situation, tons of judgment, which was not helpful, which is not like, anything I wanted to hear. And it kind of did me in.
I get it. But I see this a lot in my work. And this is like, I see women and men treated very differently in their grief, particularly around the loss of a partner. It's much more acceptable for a man to repartner after a loss than it is for a woman.
Yes.
Did you find that?
Well, I saw that, I ended up starting like a young widows group here in Los Angeles, and there were actually a few men in it. And the men were either married or coupled up already. And I don't think Marcos was yet in my life when we started the group, but all of these women were so sad and so bereft and so ready to find love again. And the men were just kind of like, didn't have that experience at all. Like it just kind of, and we noticed it as other, like widows, but as widowers, it was just, there definitely seemed to be sort of like a double standard, or their experience was very different for sure.
Yeah, I see it a lot in my work. Let's see, Amy has a question that says, how do you move forward with people, family and friends who you thought were close to, who don't acknowledge your loss?
I would have to say, like, my friends and family were tremendous and really were there for me. And if my best friend had to remind me on several occasions that I was not the only one who lost Joel. So, I'm saying, like, I was so territorial in my grief. He was my husband, but he was also a friend to so many people. My friends loved him. He was a very social and gregarious person. So it wasn't just my loss. And again, people were experiencing it differently. So for me, it was more like people I wasn't particularly close with, who I would run into. And everybody knew, like, yes, I live in Los Angeles, but where I live, we all live in like these kind of suburb kind of places. Like, we all go to the same school, go to the same doctors, go to the same tutors, go to the same dance classes. So like, whether I'm friends with people or not, the same people in your village. Most people acknowledged it. So I don't have that experience of people not really, or I know actually I do, but I don't remember what I did at the time. I think I was just annoyed and I thought, how cowardly, you know?
Yeah, I think that I see this happen a lot for people they thought were close or supportive friends don't show up in these times. And I think it teaches you a lot about who's around you and what your relationships are like. And sometimes it's painful and you have to let go of certain people, or sometimes you let go of them for a period of time and then you come back to them, I
Right.
think, but it can be hurtful. I've seen that a lot. So what are you working on now? Is there an adaptation of Widowish coming? What's happening now?
I hope so. I'm not really sure. I think the book is still very new in the world. It's doing pretty well, which just makes me so happy because, again, it keeps Joel alive and close.
Yeah.
And that is just such a gift. I'm not sure what I'm doing next, but I'm definitely going to be writing more and just keep talking to people who want to hear my story and want to hear more about this widowish life that I'm living. And certainly, it's so sad because of this year we've had with COVID. People we're just kind of coming out of it. And I think there's more room in a way to talk about grief in ways that we haven't previously, because it's really there's now like this collective grief of the world that we're all kind of like recognizing now. So
Yes,
it's an
I
interesting
agree.
time.
It's been a fascinating year for that. And I think it's been a positive that we are, really starting to acknowledge grief a lot more, find new ways to talk about it, make space for it. It's very necessary coming out of this year.
Yeah, I think so
Well,
too.
where can we find you? Where can everybody find you?
You can go to my website, which is widowish.com. You could follow me on Instagram, which is really where I will post, like, I have a new essay out, or I'm working on this new project, or the latest and greatest with my memoir. On Instagram, I'm Melissa Gould _author. I can leave that in the chat, unless Dara might be. Okay. And yeah, so I'm just, you can find me on social media and you can write me. I love hearing from people who have read my book. It continues to be so healing, to that, like, I now have this book out in the world that other people are finding resonant and helpful in their journey. Again, I think I keep saying this, but it is just such a gift to be able to share my story and know that it's helping anybody else in any way. It's really just, I'm so moved by it. I think on Amazon, I have something like over 5,000 ratings and reviews for Widowish, and I read them all, and people email me all the time, and I just can't believe it. It's really like, I did not see any of this coming. And that's why I keep thinking it's such a gift, because I really was just doing this for me, writing my story, telling my story, sharing my journey has been the most healing thing I could have done for myself. And so when I hear from other people, it's tremendous.
Oh, I'm so glad your book is out there. Thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you,
It was a pleasure
Claire.
to talk with you today. Thank you. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Reimagine. Thanks to all of you who showed up today. We will see more of you next week. hopefully. Who's next week, Dara? I don't remember.
We have a whole group of women next
Oh,
week
that's right.
who wrote a book about, I believe it's like, I forget what it's called. It's like grieving mothers, I believe. But if you follow the link, it's the second link. But it's, and I don't know if any of you attended the vigil last week, but Soo Yun Pak, she led part of the vigil, and she's just a really amazing human being. And she wrote a beautiful book with four other authors or three other authors. So they'll be joining as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Dara. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.
That was wonderful.